All right, let's talk about the body paragraphs for the photo analysis research paper. So you're going to you of course have to have your at minimum of 3 body paragraphs, right? So every essay has to have 5 paragraphs. Every essay in your whole life, you have to have 5 paragraphs. I mean, you can have more, but you can't have less. It's not a complete essay if you don't have 5 paragraphs. You'll read things about the 5 paragraph essay. Maybe if you haven't already, you'll come up and say, oh, the 5 paragraph essay, right? That's standard. Got to have the 5 paragraphs. So you must have 5 paragraphs. You can have more, you're also the research paper. You need more space, really, because you're including research. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more, how to build that in, but you need a space to do that. So it's 5 to 7 pages. Our previous ones have been 3 to 5. This one is 5 to 7, and you might be like, whoa, right? But your body paragraphs are likely to be longer than they have, because you have to include the research. So I'm going to talk about right now how to do that. Okay, so say paragraph 2, you need a transition word or phrase. You still need those. They didn't go away. So I'm going to use, my favorite one to start off with that I tend to use in, for this format. There are others, but first, right, I'm going to start with first. So you need some kind of transition word or phrase, and then you need your topic sentence. Okay, so this is what makes this not a report. Building I'm getting myself turned around here. Topic sentences are the building blocks of essays, because they are the nuts and bolts of your essay. Without topic sentences, you don't really have an essay. So you must have a topic sentence. So your topic sentence, again, it can be a reason that you think what you think in your thesis, or that you're arguing for what you're arguing for in your thesis, or it can be a smaller aspect of the larger idea. If you have an essay map thesis, like 3 correlating ideas that go together, then that can help, because then your topic sentence is one of those, the first correlating idea, second correlating ideas in the second body paragraph, third correlating ideas in the third body paragraph. So I wish I could think of a sample thesis right now, but I can't. So okay, so it's been a long day. But anyway, you're gonna have your topic sentence. It's gonna be your reason or your smaller aspect of the larger thesis, and that will be one sentence. Okay. And then you need to explain that topic sentence. So your reader is likely not to really, they haven't been thinking about this photo. Maybe they're not familiar with it. So they're getting familiar from reading this. So you need to explain in about 2 to 3 sentences. You need to explain this idea in about 2 to 3 sentences. So let's think about migrant mother. I'm trying to... if we say that it raised awareness for the plight of farm workers in the 1930s. Okay, got it. All right, let's say that was my thesis, something like that, that the photo Migrant Mother by Dorothea Lange, that this photo did a great deal to raise awareness for the plight of farm workers during the Great Depression. Maybe my first topic sentence would be, first, because of this photo, many more resources became available at migrant farm worker camps to help the farm workers, right? And so that is a smaller aspect of the big thesis. It's one way that awareness was raised, right? So, it was published. My understanding is, first, you can check this and you can work with this photo. My understanding is, I think it was published in the San Francisco Chronicle. It was definitely San Francisco, almost for sure, and I think it might have been the Chronicle. So at any rate, whoever was reading this, right, they're reading the newspaper and say they see this photo and they want to help, right? And so then, and in fact, people did. People rallied and donated food and resources and money to help the workers at that camp. Apparently, unfortunately, the woman in the photo and her family had left already by that time, but people were helped, from this awareness, right? So you would explain that, right? You would explain that in 2 to 3 sentences about awareness being raised, because again, the reader, they haven't been thinking about the photo as much as you have, so you've got to explain what you mean by that. All right, then next, you need your evidence, your example. So, because this is the research paper, you do need to have evidence from research, but because your focus is the photo, you have to keep your focus on the photo. So I'm going to say that again because it's that important. Don't lose the focus of the photo, because this paper is all centered on this photo. You should talk about the photo in every single paragraph. Introduction, each body paragraph, and the conclusion. You can't take a vacation from the photo. The photo is at the center. So, for example, it would be a huge mistake to talk about how, in this case, my example of migrant mother raised the photo, migrant mother raised the awareness of the plight of farm workers during the Great Depression. And then in each body paragraph, you have a topic sentence that talks about the plight of farm workers in the Great Depression, right? But we this is a common error that you don't want to do, where you talk about the photo and in the intro have a thesis that has something to do with the photo, and then in the 3 body paragraphs you just talk about the issue, but you don't talk about the photo anymore. No, don't do that. No. That's a huge mistake. That's not the assignment, right? So the assignment is about the photo. You have to keep the photo at the center. So that means that you have to have evidence for the photo from the photo in every body paragraph. How are you going to do that? Well, you're going to look at the photo. So you are going to give your observations of the photo. So we've had 2 homework assignments where you got some hands-on practice with that. And you're going to take that hands-on practice and you're going to apply it to your photo. I mean, here's where you get to show off your skills, right? So you are going to take your own observations and show them. That's super cool. But is that the only way to do it? No. You can also, maybe other people have researched the photo and they've made observations. So then you get to include that as well. And that's your research. So I'm going to put your evidence and example. You must have evidence and example from the photo. That can be your observations and the observations of, I'm going to put relevant sources, meaning it connects and it's an academic source. I don't mean go ask your next door neighbor what he or she thinks. That would just be like, don't do that. They don't count. They count as a person. We're happy that they're next door, but they don't count as a relevant academic source. Okay, so and then you have to have it from research as well. So the research is the articles that you're looking up, what scholars are saying, what historians are saying, that sort of thing. These can connect, because again, you might have the researcher scholars saying something about the photo, then that's fine. But your research could also be about the issue. Say you're making the observations about the photo, but then you have evidence about research about the issue, about maybe how many farm workers, in this case, were in dire straits during the Great Depression, and there were no social services really to speak of at that time. We didn't have, really even a food stamp program or anything. I mean, a lot of the social programs that we have in our society today came from this time period, came from people falling through the cracks, and our want to make a response to that, right? So but you must have, in every body paragraph, you must use the photo as evidence, whether it's your own observation, which is totally fine and valid and super awesome, and from research. And again, the research might be talking about the photo, and that's super awesome, right? Or the research could be talking about the issue that you're talking about. Either one or both is totally fine. What you can't do in this paper, though, because this is a research paper, this is the one that we're not going to use I. We're not going to talk about my experience. So even if you can like connect on some level, which depending on the issue, most of us can connect with something that we're talking about. But you're not going to talk about like if your family was involved in harvesting produce or something, you wouldn't talk about your own experience in this paper. So it's very valid, and that can be like our way to connect with the photo. But we're not going to include our own in this case because it's a research paper and that's just not the norm. So no I and no you is just not done in essays, except for directional process where you give directions, and we're not doing that. So all right, so you're going to do this in every body paragraph. You've got to have your topic sentence, then you explain in 2 to 3 sentences, your explanation. Oh, wait, there's more. Okay, so evidence, so photo, I would say 2 to 3 sentences for evidence A, 2 to 3 sentences for evidence B, and then don't forget you must have analysis. And so analysis is your focused thoughts about this issue. So in this case, it would be talking about this idea that the photo, like we're saying thesis raised awareness of the issue of the plight of farm workers during the Great Depression, and in this case, this idea that it brought about more resources for the farm workers, and then your focused thoughts on that, whatever they may be, for a few sentences. All right, that's always kind of what I thought was kind of the fun part. You get to give your thoughts, right? But in this very focused way. All right, so that is probably also going to be 2 to 3 sentences. So then if you did all that in one body paragraph, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 to 12 sentences. That's pretty standard, right? So that sounds good. So then you're going to do that again for the next body paragraph. You're going to do that again for the following body paragraph. And then you will have your conclusion. So that should leave you with about 5 to 7 pages. If it does not, if you are short and you're not to a complete 5 pages, you could do a couple of different things. One thing that you could do would be to go back into your existing body paragraphs and look, did you do all these layers? Sometimes we skip one, but we're not realizing that we did that. So just go through and see if you did all that, right? Then if you did, maybe one of them or 2 of them you could do a little more development on. So maybe you have some more facts that you could include from your research. Like you gave an example, you gave a quote, but maybe you had some more facts that were relevant and would really connect. Maybe you could include that, right? So that would develop it further, right? So you don't want to just make your font bigger. So no Costco font or anything, right? So just 12-point font. No. So or start looking up the longest words you could find in the dictionary. No, right? So, but you can kind of plump it up in a good way by adding clarity to it, by giving some more information, right? So look in here and see if you haven't done that yet. You can do that. All right. The other thing, if you feel like you've done that and you're still short, you can add an additional body paragraph. You could do that, and then you're just doing this whole thing for an additional body paragraph. So any of that is well and good. All right, so what I also want to mention, because this is a research paper, you must cite your sources. So you're going to cite them both parenthetically, also called in text, and in a works cited. All right, so parenthetically is when you have that source that you cited, you now have that quote, or you have that expert, or you have, some relevant academic source that also observed the photo, or whatever. You have to cite that person, okay? So that's called a parenthetical citation. You learned how to do that in English 120, right? Here is where you get to practice that again. So it's really important that you have the parenthetical citation. That is like the arrow that leads to your work cited. Because let's say someone read your paper and they were like, wow, I love that quote. I love that quote. And where is it from, right? And then you just have your list on your works cited. How do they know what source that came from? How could they ever possibly look it up, right? So A, you should have a paper trail because your information should be able to be verified. B, someone could be super excited when they read your paper and they wanna know more, but how can they look up the information if you didn't give them that trail, right? The parenthetical citation is your trail. So if you have like the last name of the author, then that points them to which of the sources it was, and then they can look it up, etc. Right? So, right. So you do have to cite that. All right. So then I want to talk a little bit then about the conclusion. So let's just talk about that real quick. It's not erasing, but let's try again. Okay, so your conclusion, it does need to match your intro. So you should really bring up the title of that photo again, right? So you should bring up the title of the photo. You should touch back on the thesis. Anything that's in your intro should really just be mentioned again. So here we go. So conclusion should be a full conclusion. So you're looking at about 4 to 7 sentences. What should you do? Well, you need to touch back on the intro. Touch back on the thesis. Touch back. You should give some closure, kind of wrap it up. And no new info. I'm going to put touch back on the intro, also touch back on title of photo. Okay. Probably photographer's name too would be a good idea. I'm going to put that in. Photographer's name. Okay, you can choose to summarize your topic sentences. That is optional. That's one way. It can be effective. Topic sentences, I'm going to put optional. And then very important, oh yeah, I already put that, no new information. All right, so your conclusion, it should touch back on your introduction, whatever you mentioned in your introduction, touch back on it. Touch back on your thesis. Wrap it up, give some closure, no cliffhangers. It shouldn't just kind of come to an abrupt halt. No, just it should come to a satisfying conclusion, right? Everything's kind of wrapped up. No new information. So no new points, no new examples, no breaking news, right? This just in. No, don't do that right to the reader. And don't disagree with your thesis. Sometimes it's easy to do that, like, well, it did raise awareness in some ways, but, in some ways, it really didn't do enough. Okay, but that doesn't support your thesis, right? That's another paper. That's maybe for another time. But keep supporting your thesis. No new information. Don't disagree with your thesis. And you could choose to summarize your topic sentences. Just kind of wrap it up. I did want to mention, I neglected to mention, in the body of your paper, you must address the opposition. This is an argument paper still. And you have a thesis that you are arguing for a point. So whatever you mentioned as the controversy in your intro, you need to address that somewhere in the body of your paper. I'm only looking for you to address one major issue of the oppositions in one of your body paragraphs. I'm not looking for you to do, at every body paragraph. You can, if that's how it works out, but I'm just looking for one. You're not going to argue for them, so you're not going to say, switch gears and then argue against your thesis. Don't do that. You have to support your thesis, but you can say, like, some would argue that, whatever their argument is, and then say however, and then you want to do your however. So let's talk about that a little bit. I meant to kind of show you that more, but I didn't. So, okay. So let's talk about that just a little bit more on the opposition, how to deal with that in the body of the paragraph. So opposition. All right. So one way to do, one thing too, you don't argue for them. Okay, so don't argue for them. Meaning saying that you need to keep supporting your thesis. Okay, keep supporting your thesis, but you do need to refute their claim. But what I like to sort of say it in a different way, because I'll explain. You have either show why your view is more compelling, or show how you can address their concerns. So basically, you want to treat the opposing view, one of their major ideas against your idea, you want to treat it as a legitimate concern. Okay, so that's why you are refuting their claim, but I hesitate to use that word because sometimes I think I am going to refute them, and you're like, we just have to like put them in their place. You know, it's really not about that. It's about treating their concern as a legitimate concern, but with a spirit of goodwill, so that they're not the enemy. They're just an intelligent person with a different viewpoint, all right? And if you picture them that way, it's easier to have that spirit of goodwill. And then you're either showing that while they have a legitimate concern or a legitimate differing view, that your view is for some reason more compelling. Or that perhaps you can address their concerns in some way. So maybe the controversy with this one, that it did, maybe like the thesis, if I had my sample thesis about migrant mother raising awareness for the plight of farm workers during the Great Depression, maybe some of the controversy of that might be that the woman in the photo did not necessarily want to take on that role, and perhaps didn't necessarily feel that she was given the option of not taking on that role. And so one might, argue that she should have been given the choice. So that is a legitimate view. And it counters that sample thesis. So I might say that, yes, that while that is true, that it would have been probably better if she were clearly aware that this photo would be publicized and her image would be like world, known all over the world and that sort of thing. But despite that she wasn't really aware that that's what's going to happen, that even though that is, it would have been ideal if it had worked out that way, that even so, this photo did so much to raise awareness for the plight of the many, many, many farm workers at the time, and the working conditions that they were under, and the way that they had no security, and the many, many unnamed men and women and their children that were in really difficult circumstances, and that this photo did so much to raise awareness and have people have awareness, empathy, and even provide resources for some of these folks, was that it was still made this big impact, even despite that flawed situation. That this was more compelling. It was bigger, even than the issue, that it became symbolic of a problem in society that needed to be resolved. And that even though just taking the individual circumstances of the woman and of Dorothea Lange, the photographer, that it was bigger than both of them, perhaps, something like that. And of course, whatever you're doing to address the opposition, you do need evidence. So again, you're going to look at the photo, right? You're going to get that evidence from the photo, and you can get evidence from the research. I could probably find a quote that maybe even had someone saying what I just, that idea or something for evidence, and just looking at the photo itself and how compelling that really was to people, perhaps um, or how you could address their concerns. So maybe by addressing their concerns, it's true that that the woman in the photo that her name wasn't published at the time, or she wasn't asked if she wanted her photo published in this big way, I guess. But one could look at that there is some research that shows that years and years later in the 1980s, I believe it was, that when she was suffering from cancer, that finally one of her children came forward and said that this was her, and it enabled people still had empathy for her. Because she had through just her image being had this big impact, and people she was without health insurance at the time, and people donated money to her personally to help with her medical care. So you could even say that that's a way of addressing their concerns, that yes, it is a legitimate concern that she really didn't give her permission in a sense for this to become famous in this way of her picture. But even so, it ended up helping her individually in the long run, one could argue, right? So you just need to address the opposition. You do need evidence. So if I was doing that, I would have the quote from her son, or wherever that came from, and research. You can research it if you're doing that. I read that, but don't have the article off the top of my head. All right, so I'm hoping that this was helpful. I meant to do this with the others, but I'm doing it now for your opposition just to show that a little closer. I hope that could help. Um, so I'm hoping that was helpful just to give you that overview if you were doing the photo analysis. I hope the practice has helped with the homework assignments if you are choosing to do this one. All right, thanks again.